Delegates from rival Libyan factions have proposed a new unity government for the chaotic country. And that's after months of UN mediation and the rejection of a previous cabinet proposal. The Unity Presidential Council announced the 18-member government late on Sunday in the Moroccan city of Skhirat. The council was formed after negotiations in Morocco last year with the aim of forming a unity government. The latest proposal needs approval from the internationally recognized parliament in the East, which rejected a proposed unity government last month. The Unity Presidential Council includes representatives from the rival parliaments and governments, as well as delegates from other factions.
After very hard negotiations, we managed to have a new cabinet made up of 13 ministers and 5 ministers of state. The ministries are Defense, Finance, Interior, Foreign Affairs, Justice, Local Government, Economy and Industry, Social Affairs, Employment and Training, Health, Education, Planning and Communications. The choice was made on competence, experience, geography, division, Libyan political spectrum, and the competence of the Libyan society. Women have got 3 ministerial portfolios. The list was sent to Parliament. We hope that Parliament is aware of how dangerous the situation is and that it will take the right decision by approving the government, by giving it its confidence so that it could start working and face the current threats.
So near yet so far is how many have described Libya's political process. Attempts to form a national government have borne no fruit. And since the toppling of former Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi, CCTV's Robert Negila now looks at how the political process has fared.
Well, chaos has reigned in Libya since 2011 after an armed rebellion supported by NATO toppled Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. A rebel council was formed thereafter in 2012 and the General National Congress took over leadership of the country. Now, it was replaced in 2014 by the House of Representatives. However, a coalition of Islamist groups under the banner Libya Dawn elected their own prime minister, forcing out the House of Representatives. Eventually, they set up a political base in Tobruk, in effect giving Libya 2 centers of power. But the power vacuum has given rise to a third force, the Islamic State, who currently control territory in Libya, including Skhirat, Gaddafi's hometown. Now, since 2015, the United Nations has been mediating peace talks between the 2 warring parties, but without much success. But if a political settlement is finally reached in a country with no formal army, where the most powerful militia makes the rules, this may signal the rebirth of the Libyan state. Back to you.
Robert Negila there with that deliberation. Let's discuss this further now, and CCTV's Youssef Gaiji is joining us from Tunis, and Liling Tan is, I beg your pardon, Lorna Shadik is live for us in New York. First, to you, Youssef, in Tunis. How has news of a reconstituted Libyan unity government, though, been received in Tunisia?
Well, the news was very well received in Tunisia. There is a very high price for Tunisia with all the destabilization of Libya. Further destabilization in Libya will have a very high cost, whether in terms of security or economy in Tunisia. So most politicians here were very happy, but many people were skeptical as to whether this government will actually succeed in stabilizing Libya and bringing back security or not.
Well, Lorna, to you though, in New York, stabilizing Libya is now a matter of priority. The growing threat of ISIL, though, is making stabilizing Libya an urgent matter. Is the United States, though, still considering direct military strikes inside Libya?
It certainly still is. Indeed, President Obama has been deliberating on whether or not to take those strikes for some time now. And it comes actually after testimony recently to the House Foreign Affairs Committee in Washington by the US envoy to the anti-ISIL coalition. And he said the ISIL branch in Libya is the greatest cause for concern for the US right now. In fact, President Obama has already directed his national security team to bolster their counter-terrorism efforts in Libya. In fact, they've already been targeting IS there. In November, the Pentagon said an American airstrike took out a former head of IS in Libya. And recently, the New York Times also reported that US and British Special Operations Forces had been active in the country as well. We also know from the recent budget proposal here in the US that the Department of Defense is now seeking $200 million in the 2017 budget for counter-terror operations in Libya specifically. So that's really the first concrete indication that we've had that the Pentagon is seemingly providing for potential military action in Libya, although no details on what that might be, whether it will be airstrikes, boots on the ground, more drone flights, that kind of thing. But it's clear that the US certainly is still considering this action, and indeed the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee said just last week that the US, I quote, is on the verge of taking action against ISIS in Libya.
Indeed, a lot is being considered now in the Libyan situation. Yusuf, thought to you, that news of a reconstituted national government for Libya, is the new lineup likely to receive internal support in Libya as well as regionally?
Well, first and foremost, this new government has to be approved and voted in by the House of Representatives, which is based in Tobruk and which is internationally recognized. However, the difficulty, and as stated by Martin Kobler today in a security conference, one of the most difficult problems facing Libya at the moment is finding a security structure that combines all the factions and militias and the various political forces of Libya. And that's where the difficulty is, because I've been talking to a lot of Libyans today, and they were wondering, where is this government going to operate from? Because the capital Tripoli, which is the most important and the most populated area in Libya, is now under the control of militias who have openly said that any government coming from a UN-backed plan is considered as an invasion, and they would rather look for a Libyan solution. So obviously militias and political forces now in the capital Tripoli are not ready to accept this government from what we understand so far. How is this going to play into this government moving into the capital? There is also a lot of questions around the sovereign institutions like the Libya oil and gas industry or the Libyan airlines, which are divided at the moment between East and West, and many of them are in Tripoli, others in Benghazi. And we do not know how these institutions will come under the control of this government so that they can work and operate from the capital and secure the whole country.
Right. Ilona, you have mentioned earlier, though, about U.S. stabilization efforts of Libya, but there has also been international pressure to fast-track the transition administration in Libya. What options does the United Nations, though, have to ensure the proposed setup is implemented?
Well, in the short term, what's needed really in terms of getting this new setup going, first of all, as we heard, is that two-thirds of legislators will need to directly approve the overall political agreement, and then a simple majority will be needed to pass a vote of confidence in the new government. But then, as we've heard, there is a need for the new government to move to the capital as soon as possible, and the UN will need to facilitate that, and also ensure that there are sufficient security arrangements for this new government as well, both of which will be very difficult tasks in a very divided and factionalized country. But the big problem really facing the UN, I think, is that there is still a big lack of trust in it as an institution. Now, that came after the previous UN envoy to Libya, Bernardino Leon, was sacked after he was found to have a conflict of interest when he was negotiating an agreement last year. Ever since then, although he was replaced by Martin Kobler, there really has been a lack of trust among Libyans for the UN as an institution, and that is really what it will need to deal with. That may be, it may be that it deals with that by passing some responsibility for fighting IS, for example, to Libyans themselves and to Libyan security forces. But as we've heard, given the factionalism within the Libyan security establishment, the West and its allies in particular are unlikely to be particularly happy about that. So now some experts here have already said that what's needed is to support a more integrated security setup so that, for example, when it comes to training Libyan forces, we ensure that there are joint command centres in place so that these different militias have to work together. And that will be the challenge for the UN going forward, to ensure that these different factions can work together towards a common goal.
All right, Lorna Shadik joining us there from New York, and Yusuf Gaiji in Tunis. To you both, thank you.